welcome to Gisha TV. Today's guest is German sports historian and director of Sheikh Abdullah Al Salem Center in Kuwait. Please help us welcome Dr. Christian Wacker.
I would consider myself also professionally as somebody who works in the field of museology and museum culture. But most of my life I was dealing with sports in the same time. So therefore I could recognize very well how much it means to suffer with sports, which is a side phenomenon in the high cultural field, because not everybody recognizes sports as cultural duty, and many people still leave it aside and do not understand that sports is it's a cultural expression of all cultures around the world. It's a very globalized phenomenon, but there's no market behind sports heritage, sports history than you have in modern arts, for example, or most of the other markets in culture. So therefore it has not the same standing and not the same value and recognition, I would say. But I visited 2 years ago. I had been in Washington, D.C., and I had the chance to visit the fantastic museum of the African American people, and they have a huge exhibit about Black people performing sports. And this was very interesting because this gallery had been bigger than many other galleries where Black people are adjusted to. So I liked it a lot because, of course, through sports, which is an underdog phenomenon, right? So many people from minorities, many people from some sides of the society have chances to reach up and become famous. Wherever you look, football, soccer is the best example for that. I mean, where new players are recruited, they're usually recruited amongst the social lower population, the same applies to sports a bit, I would say.
How did you become interested in sports history? Because it's not something that many people think about. They think about doing sports in so many different aspects of it, and then archaeology and history and art history and so on. But sports history, how did you become specifically interested in that?
I mean, the answer is like the answer of somehow all of us who end up with the sports heritage and sports history, right? So it's not the dream of a small boy, the professional dream of a small boy who says, we would like to become a sports historian. No, in my case, it was a real coincidence, because not like many other sports journalists or sports historians who come from professional sports, it was very different in my case. I studied archaeology, classics and archaeology, and I had the chance to do my PhD in ancient Greece in Olympia. So I found myself, I ended up in an archaeological site, which was as one of the earliest one in the world related to sports, or how you would say in ancient terms, to agon, to competitions. And so I used to do my PhD there, and ended up to meet some people. Amongst them, I would say my main mentor, his name is Norbert Müller in Germany, and who really brought me to sports and sports history. So I was an archaeologist, very traditional archaeologist, participated in excavations, and did my PhD about a topic which was highly related to sports in antiquity. And thinking about sports in antiquity brings you very quickly to modern sports. And talking about sports for us, which is a normality, created problems already for me, because sports did not exist in antiquity. So there was the competition. I mean, today we have the first, the second, the third winner. Antiquity knew only one winner and the others are losers. So this philosophical approach is completely different. And this, of course, caught interest and I started to go deeper into it, and I ended up to study a lot about sports in the 19th century, and especially the differences between sports in antiquity and modern sports, coming from the philosophical sports term which was defined in England. So this caught my attention, and then I slipped into the world of sports. So taking over some assignments for museum concepts, sports museum concepts. This happened very early. I was assigned to do a concept for the Winter Sport Museum in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, where the Olympic Games used to take place in the 1936. And then one came to the other. And I ended up to become a museologist, working in sports museums and dealing with sports history. But until today, the big topic about, I would call it, the huge gap between competitive agones or competitive sports in antiquity and modern sports, as we know it since the 19th century, takes my attention, heavily takes my attention.
As a historian and a bit of a history geek, I'm a little, if we can touch on the study of sports history, like the historiography of sports history, if we can just touch on that a little bit. When did people start to study history of sports as, not necessarily as we know it today, which is, you know, very specific academic mode of research, but what is the earliest examples of, you know, people studying, especially in antiquity, or relating to classicism and antiquity?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because the interest if I talk about antiquity, I will continue to speak about the agones or the agon, so the competition in antiquity. And the interest studying this phenomenon is very old. It's as old as the interest to study antiquity in general. So it goes back to the Renaissance times, because at the Renaissance times, when all those ancient writings had been rediscovered and reread, also the famous writings of Pausanias, the description of Olympia, became popular again, and the people started to talk about sports in antiquity. But sports, as let's say, sports history as a modern academic discipline, is something which came from two sides. On the one side, you have the people dealing with ancient history, with classics, so academics working in classics, and they started to read ancient history about sports phenomena. This is one side. And this is a development which goes back to the late 19th century, I would say. But sports history, as part of a sports scientific education, came later. So sports history became a discipline at many huge universities who are educating in sports science, and it became a small part of sports science. So if you look at the people dealing with sports history today, both antiquity and also modern sports, you recognize that there are a lot of people from, I would call it, basic topics like history, like Latin, Greek, antiquity. So they're dealing with sports in antiquity. But many people who studied sports and have a sports background, they came into sports history as well. So the academic, I would say, scenery, and this is also reflected by the sports journalist scenery. The academic scenery is a very diverse one. So you have people who come from the sports context, and you have people who come from the traditional classics history context, dealing with sports. You might imagine that the outcome is very different. And of course, the people, many people coming from the pure historical disciplines, they love to look down to the sports journalism and also to the sports scientists. But I would say the viewpoint is a different one. And therefore, we have good conditions studying sports history today, because we're coming from different directions. But we have still the problem of recognition of sports as a pure and serious academic discipline in society. If I may connect another personal story to that, one of the reasons why I ended up in sports history at the end and started to love this field as my academic passion, let's say, is that being an archaeologist and being in archaeology meant to be liaised with a very clearly defined group of academic interested people. So whatever you do in your field, you know the people who are interested in. And somebody said more as a funny fact, but he said, why should we publish our books? Because we know our clients, you know, we send an email around and we reach everybody. So I felt very much imprisoned in this very small community. And having the chance, I remember I was in Olympia, and I was asked by our supervisor at the archaeological excavation to take over a guided tour for a group of people from the Olympics, you know. And amongst them, there had been IOC members and very valuable and important people. So I took them around the archaeological site, and I had been invited to give a lecture to a bigger group. And I recognized that the things I was doing get recognized to a much broader audience, because, wanting it or not, sports is something which matters to all of us. So I thought somehow it's a chance we can use also as academics to reach out to many other people. And during my career, I went very often to ancient Olympia, also to the International Olympic Academy, which is there, teaching. I had been professor there and was teaching my topic, which was ancient Olympic Games. But there had been groups with 50, 100 people coming from all around the world. So, and you reach out to those people, and they might reach out to their companions in their home countries. And this gave me recognition, which felt, to be honest, very well. And it does until today.
What is your pitch, right? What is your pitch about why people need to study or be interested in the history of sports? Why does it matter? When you talk about sports heritage, it just sounds something so, I mean, in America, the first thing people ask you is, do you collect baseball cards?
Yeah.
You know, or do you have like T-shirts? And in Europe, it's, I mean, in most places, it's nationalistic, right? There's a lot of elements of nationalism that go into it. But in general, how do you tell people, you know, like future generations of, or upcoming generations of, you know, sports people who are leaving sports, or curators or historians, why sports history matters?
I mean, if this question comes up from wherever it comes from, I always used to reflect myself and also ask others to reflect their own living circumstances, you know. Many people are organized in sports clubs, you know. They go to sports clubs, they participate, perhaps the kids play football, or perhaps they themselves, they practice some sports. Perhaps they go to the sports academy. Perhaps they only go to the lake in the summer times and swim a little bit in the lake. As soon as they do that, you can make them realize that they keep also rememberings. They keep memories. They keep memories from their own experiences. And as soon as they start to keep their memories, they're into sports history. It's very simple. And then I also ask them, listen, you remember the Olympic Games? Do you remember I mean, here in Europe, you know, football it's in the US as well, with the soccer football. But you ask somebody, do you remember 82? Do you remember this? Or if they are younger, perhaps they remember special races. Somehow everybody is somewhere into sports. And as soon as it comes to sports as a memory, you are into sports history with full speed. So this is the interesting thing. It's a participative topic, because everybody is involved. It's not like the high history, I don't know, 100 years of the end of the First World War. This is a topic which you might survive without knowing about it, but not with sports, because sports is part of your daily life. And here we come directly also to the problem, because we are heavily into popular culture, and popular culture is not yet recognized enough by this, which we may call high culture, I don't know, elitist culture. So, and this is one of the biggest problems we also have. I think we might discuss this as well, because the recognition of sports history is not there. I would say, I mean, working with students always brought back and brought big return of incentivation and new thoughts and opens the mind. I mean, in general, working with students is fascinating. And I recall so many seminars I had been the chance to supervise, many of them with excursions, and many of them went to ancient Greece as well. So this is something where you can contribute in order to passionate also others to perhaps start similar directions. But I would say the most memorable projects I recall are exhibitions which I had the chance to organize. I had the chance to organize one exhibition back in 2004 during the Olympic Games taking place in Athens, Greece. And the idea was to bring back the ancestor of the Olympic movement, Pierre de Coubertin, to Greece and connect Greece and the Greek heritage with the modern Olympic Games in 1896. The thing about it was one of those exhibitions, surprise, surprise, which had not enough budget. And, and it was one of the exhibitions which had a completely new topic, because if you set up an exhibit, there are always possibilities to get together bits and pieces of things which already had been done in the past. This was brand new. And we had a location in Athens, and we had to bring the whole exhibition to Athens. So having no budget, but we wanted to do it because this was a passion project. A real passion project. So, and we did it as part of the association Comité International Pierre de Coubertin. And we had been various students who voluntarily came with me. And I had a motorhome in those times. So we had a small lorry and the motorhome, and we traveled to Greece with the whole exhibition and set it up and brought it to life. And there had been another person named Jean Dury. He was the creative mastermind, the curator of this exhibition. And we did it all together, And to achieve something like that, which you don't achieve it because you get out a lot of money of it. You achieve it because you want to give something to the people who might be interested in it. This for me was a very memorable moment. And another one, a very short anecdote, had been an exhibition I had the chance to organize as director of the Qatar Olympic Sports and Olympia Museum in Qatar. And this was in 2013. So this had been, I think, the biggest temporary exhibition about Olympic sports ever. And such a big project, of course, demands a lot of energy. And to have had the chance to achieve that and to recognize the open minds of the state of Qatar, and especially the members of the royal family who had been in charge in this project, having Qatar as part of the modern world and opening the country, and also being successful doing that through such an exhibition project was something extremely beautiful in my career. Those, I would say, are the two most memorable moments.
You had talked about research that you're doing, if I recall correctly, on Native Americans in sports.
It will be a paper which will be published later on. It's one which really needs a lot of basic research. And this is what gives me a lot of pleasure. To be honest, I read a book about the famous Olympic athlete Jim Thorpe some month ago, and a very good book. You know, it's some kind of a biography about this extraordinary athlete, but also extraordinary example of sports politics and sports policies, because Jim Thorpe apparently was stated a professional athlete, so he had to give back his Olympic medals, because in those times, 1912, you had to be amateur, and therefore he had to give back his medals, and it took very long until after his death that he got back his medals. Now, I read a biography about Jim Thorpe, and I thought by myself, listen, the whole topic about minorities in Olympics, or let's say in general, minorities performing in global events is an extremely important topic. I give another example for Turkey, for modern Turkey. The first Olympic athletes had been Armenians. So knowing the history of Turkey, somebody might understand what this means, you know, and this phenomenon is very strong. I mean, in the United States, think about Rudolph's, the famous female athlete, and the treatment of those people. So does it mean to be an Olympic hero? Does it mean that I get the Olympic recognition, or let's say the country's recognition I really deserve? Question mark. This is a question which stands behind it, and therefore I'm analyzing the situation of Native Americans in the past, but also today, and what is their role inside the Olympic teams, how they are treated, how they are behaved. I mean, those questions had been posed and are still asked also towards African American athletes, but it's a very specific topic to talk about Native Americans. And I think the outcome will be very interesting, because we recognize, of course, change in society behavior, and the things had been different, obviously, 100 years ago than they are today. But one might recognize that minorities are always recognized as minorities, you know. I remember the very famous football player in Germany, his name was Lukas Podolski, you know. And he performed the World Championship, but he has a Polish origin, so a non-German origin. So what this makes with the athletes, and it's obvious, you know. So he's considered the Polish guy if he's performing badly, and he's considered the German guy if he's performing well. I'm exaggerating, but this topic tells us very much that sports can also be a very nice tool in order to study cultural identification and cultural behavior. And here sports becomes very, very interesting, extremely interesting. The definition where politics starts and where personal emphasis ends is not clearly definable. So there's one situation, only a small story, there's one situation of two athletes who both had been of former Soviet Union. They had been colleagues, two ladies, they had been colleagues, and they were training together, performing very well. And then the Soviet Union broke apart, and one became athlete of Georgia, the modern country of Georgia. The other one remained Russian. And the games happened during a conflict between the both countries. But the both ladies, they were hugging and they were hugging and behaving very friendly at the Olympic Games. You don't imagine how journalism took such a photograph, such a scenery, in order to give political interpretation to it. So this example for me only shows that it's not really possible to exclude politics from sports. On the other side, it's fully understandable that the Olympic Committee does not want the Olympic stage to be used or misused for political statements.
Right.
The most famous one is from 1968, the Black
Right.
Fist, which everybody knows. So we all consider this as appropriate. And yes, it was important to do that. But it could be another gesture, which goes exactly in the opposite direction. And good politics against bad politics is always defined before the background, before the background of the current times they're playing in. So therefore, yes, it's not easy. It's challenging, as you said, but I think it's needed. The big events, the mega events, they are all related to a lot of financial impact. So I would say today it's very simple. The more financial impact you have towards such a mega event, the more difficult it gets if it has to be cancelled for reasons which can be diverse. But now the reason is the pandemic, because those big mega events, they are completely dependent on the television rights. So if there is no television, which means there is no event, then it's getting extremely difficult for the organizations which sit behind. I regard this, I'm very sad about this, because this might, even if you're considering it in a pessimistic way, this might even mean that those organizations might break apart. If those pandemics go very long. So this is why I'm very sad. On the other side, I would say perhaps these experiences we make since 1.5 years could be experiences to consider the real impact, or let's say the real goal of such organizations. Speaking about the International Olympic Committee, it's bringing people together, it's educating through Olympic values, and you could organize this in smaller groups as well. That's possible. So perhaps the lesson to be learned could be not to go always Citius, Altius, Fortius, higher, faster, and stronger, but perhaps to find a format which even fits with those kind of difficult situations. Because what we recognize now, I mean, sports events always are some kind of a motor. They are some kind of idea giver for people also to practice sports. I mean, there are studies about this. If I sit in front of the television and I watch a baseball game, or I watch a tennis game, I feel motivated to practice these things by myself. Not everybody's doing, but this is motivating. We have an increase of the esports scenery right now, which is a purely digital phenomenon. So we find this, and the traditional sports competitions, they are getting back. There are more reasons for this. It's not only the pandemic, but another reason is that individual sports is so important in our days. We don't go to the sports club in order to play with various people together. No, we go to the academy. We do it by ourselves. We do yoga at home in front of the television, whatever. So this community building, asset of sports, all these things are breaking away. And I think we should do the maximum possible that this is not happening. And having those big traditional sports events like the Olympics and many others is a very important part of to lower the grade of such international games. Perhaps less disciplines, perhaps less athletes, whatever. That's not our topic. But if we do this, you also do a big contribution into climate changes, and all these things will be needed. And the world community is nearly in agreement about the fact that changes are needed. They know that it's needed, but I think the tools are different in the different countries. But anyhow, yes, those big events, they have to take take part in that. So it will not happen any longer that I don't know, all the countries travel around the world, including journalists, including whatever. But also here, people learned during the pandemic. I know you probably watch one or the other sports event as well. And you recognize that the journalists today, they don't travel to the event location anymore. They still sit in their studio. They have excellent footage material, and they are reporting following the footage material. It's a possibility. It's possible to do that. Right now, I'm working on a book about sports in museum, and this is my absolutely preferred topic because having worked in two different sports museums as director, I understand very well the big challenges which we face in sports museums. And I would say there are several challenges, but the biggest challenge is the lack of recognition by many cultural workers. Only the fact that the big International Council of Museums, ICOM, does not have a section for sports museums tells us very clearly how sports museums are still how sports museums are recognized and still not presented the way they deserve. So there are some tentatives to discuss about sports museums, but it's a pity because there are so many museums. I did a research, and I guess we have around 1,500 to 2,000 sports museums in the world currently. And not all of them are museums following the ICOM rules with big collection and so forth, but many of them have. And many of the Hall of Fames, which are so popular all around the Anglo-Saxonian world, all the Hall of Fames, many of them are real sports museums because they collect, they exhibit, they educate, everything takes place there. But they also have let's call it the heroization. But the heroization, the hero cult is something which brings the visitors. And hero cult to display, I don't know, to display a big tennis star, is it so much different to display a valuable and very well-known art object in a museum? Question mark, I don't know. But sports in museums is something which deserves more recognition. And this is why I'm bringing this book together. And this is, I'm basically fighting for since many years, that the sports museums should not sit between sports and culture. They are part of culture, and it's a cultural expression. Sports is a cultural expression all over the world. And it's also part of sports, because sports without a soul is no sports. But now we have the problem that many times the sports museums, they're sitting in between. You have the cultural area, you have the sports area, and they're sitting in between somewhere. And I think we have, especially from the side of the cultural workers, the museum people, we have to fight for stronger recognition. And sports is part of our culture, and therefore sports deserves to be collected, to be exhibited, to be educated the same way than everything else. Everybody accepts popular culture as a very important, let's say, exhibition tool in these days. So sports is part of popular culture. So why can't it be recognized as many other things as well? I mean, to be honest, I know more colleagues who work in museums and in culture who respect sports than don't respect. But there are too many who don't respect yet. So, it's very funny because this is something which comes back, which goes back to the 19th century philosophy. You know, that sports is only for the people. Sports is something, you know, for the professionals, the boxers who have to earn money, you know. But as we are part of the aristocracy, we don't do sports. The maximum we do is some amateur sports to play with the balls here or play with the balls there. So it's a little bit this thinking which comes from that time, which goes into cultural thinking in our days as well. This is one of the reasons why sports is not accepted the way it should. So I'm director of a cultural center in Kuwait right now, which is the Sheikh Abdullah Al Salem Cultural Center. And the concept of this cultural center is one which combines education and entertainment. The word edutainment I do not use anymore, so therefore it's a real good mixture of education and entertainment with 5 different museums for space, for science and technology, a natural history museum. There is also a museum for Arab Islamic sciences. There's an aquarium, there's a tropical garden. So there's a huge variety of offers which are made for family visitors, but also singles, but especially to educate families and entertain families as well. And this cultural center in Kuwait is a very good example of, I would say, one of those hybrid museum types, you know. Collecting is not the main duty, but reaching out to visitors and incentivizing the visitors. This is the main thing. And therefore, I love to be active there, and I will be probably for the next time to get a exhibition program together and to set up some summits in order to reach out to the people there. Saying that it is not related to sports, of course, is not true, because everything is related to sports. So. We even have an exhibition about body and mind, and the whole topic body and mind is tackled very often in many museums, especially in science museums. And here you go, you're completely into sports. And so we will see. I mean, this part of the world, the Middle East, especially Kuwait, is extremely interesting because those countries are countries in permanent society change. They have very young societies, they have extremely well educated societies, and people who are thinking and acting very globalized. So those are spots in the Middle East, those are spots where you really might be able to find life of the future, you know, how the people interact, how they live together, and in different societies and in different groups. And doing cultural work for these societies is very interesting. I forgot to mention that part of the museum, part of this cultural center is a fine arts center. And so it's an open fine arts center for modern art. And yes, art is one of the first expression, especially in Middle East. The Middle Eastern art scene is very strong and very creative, and I would say very modern. So it's a challenge on the one side, but on the other side, it's a big chance, you know, to work in such a cultural environment, and and developing a cultural center. That's great. And your last question, because it's this very beautiful question. You would ask a kid, you would ask, what is your preferred profession if you're big, you know? And you were asking for the dream project. My dream project goes very much into this direction. because as I said earlier, for me, sports as cultural expression is extremely important. And many cultures, they literally define themselves through sports. This, of course, in earlier cultures had been much stronger than in our industrialized modern cultures. Sorry. But some of the modern cultures still do that. The US is one very good example about that. You know, I mean, you divide the country in football teams, in American football teams, and you can do that. But I think I mention only this example because it's not only about the traditional cultures, you know, the Cherit game played in Turkey, or the Buzkashi played in Afghanistan, or the bungee jumping from Papua New Guinea, whatever. It's not so much about the traditional sports. It's also about the modern tradition or sports of our modern society. What I would love to achieve, perhaps in this life or the next one, who knows, but what I would like to achieve is to set up a traveling exhibit in order to get cultural sports to a broader public and make others understand about the culture of the others. You know, it could be a digital format, it could be a book format. I would prefer an exhibit because this is what gets most visibility. An exhibit which goes from the United States to Turkey to Finland to I don't know, to Central Africa, to the Arab world, to Asia, and makes and excavates, going back to archaeology, excavates the sports traditions and combines it with the traditions, which it could be like a snowball, you know, that the exhibit gets bigger and bigger. But it doesn't have to be an exhibit. I don't have a clear form in mind. But what I love is to really dig out sports as cultural, as part of culture, and make the people understand it. That's the most important. This is something I would love to do, and therefore these examples we were discussing the whole the last time, all these examples we are discussing, they're all part of it. They are. And I don't know, I'm located here in southern Germany, so in Bavaria. And yeah, it's of course part of my culture to go skiing. I don't know anybody here in the villages who is not able to ski. It's amazing. I mean, if you tell this story to somebody living in Mali or Mauritania, they won't understand. And vice versa, we won't understand as well. But having digged out those stories and letting the people know about those stories, it might get us a little bit closer. And I would love to see that.
So your dream job is basically to collaborate with Geisha and work on a project like that. See? Yes. We have that cleared. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and to following Geisha and Geisha TV on your preferred social media platforms. You will find the links down below. Hope to see you soon. Just when will I see you again? When I'm with you, I can't help but wondering, when will I see